The message came at 3 a.m. Beijing time, while the West was sleeping, while the markets were closed, while no one was watching. China has issued an ultimatum, not through diplomatic channels, not through polite press releases, through actions, concrete, measurable, irrevocable actions. And these actions have a message to the United States, a message to the West, a message to the entire world. Venezuela was the red line, and that line has been crossed. On January 3rd, 2026, Nicolas Maduro was captured. The USA has taken control of Venezuela, of the country with the world's largest oil reserves, of a country that owes China $67 billion, of a country that was a strategic partner of Beijing, and China has responded not with words, with consequences. What has happened in the last 72 hours changes everything. The world order as we knew it no longer exists. The power struggle has begun, and you stand in the middle of it. Whether you want to or not, subscribe to this channel and activate the bell. What you will learn in the next few minutes will change your view of world politics forever. Let me explain to you what China has done. First, the debt. Venezuela owes China $67 billion. This is not just any loan. This is the result of 15 years of strategic partnership. This debt was built up over years. Loans for infrastructure, roads, bridges, power plants, loans for oil production, drilling rigs, pipelines, refineries, loans for everything possible. In return, Venezuela delivered oil daily for years, hundreds of thousands of barrels. That was the deal. Oil for loans. A deal that worked for both sides. China got oil at guaranteed prices. Venezuela got capital that no Western bank wanted to give anymore. But now Maduro is gone. Now the USA controls Venezuela, and China has asked a question. A very simple question. A question worth $67 billion. Who will pay back the $67 billion now? $67 billion don't just disappear. I have documented everything, all data, all connections, all reactions in the financial research, link in the description. But let me show you now what happened next. The new government in Caracas, installed by Washington, has given a clear answer. These debts are illegitimate. These debts were taken on under a dictator. These debts will not be recognized. That was the official statement. Within 48 hours after the takeover, $67 billion simply gone, simply declared void. Imagine someone owes you 67,000 euros, and then someone else comes, takes over their house, and says, this debt no longer exists. What would you do? China knows exactly what it's doing. Press the like button if you understand that this is not a normal diplomatic crisis. Let me show you how China responded. The first reaction came within 24 hours. Beijing has stopped all oil imports from Venezuela, immediately without warning. The tankers that were already underway were redirected. The contracts were suspended, the payments were frozen. That might sound like a punishment for Venezuela, but it's the opposite. It's a message to the new government. The message reads, you cannot sell our oil. You cannot take over our contracts. You get nothing. The USA thought they could take over Venezuela and then sell the oil. To whom? To China. China says no to Europe. The refineries for Venezuelan heavy oil. To India. India already has contracts with Russia and the Middle East. The USA now sits on 303 billion barrels of oil, and they have no buyer. That is the first element of the ultimatum. You have taken Venezuela, but you cannot do anything with it. Stop. What I just showed you, China has stopped all oil imports within 24 hours. The USA sits on oil without buyers. That is only part of the story. In the financial research, I've documented 4 more reactions that are not in the headlines, with all data, all sources, all connections that I cannot show in this video. The China analysis plus Venezuela, silver, dollar, and every new documentation that I publish, one access, all analyses permanently, link in the description. But now let me show you the second reaction. The second reaction came 48 hours later. China has tightened export restrictions, not just for rare earths, for everything. Gallium, germanium, antimony, tungsten, graphite. Materials without which no computer chips can be manufactured. Materials without which no electric vehicles can be built. Materials without which no modern weapons function. The USA just took over Venezuela, and China just cut off the materials that the USA needs to keep their economy running. That is no coincidence. That is retaliation. That is the second component of the ultimatum. You take our investments, we take your supply chains. The third reaction came this morning, and this one is the most dangerous. China has announced to review its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds. To review? That sounds harmless, but in the language of central banks, that is a threat, a massive threat. China holds about $770 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. If they sell these, the following happens. Interest rates on U.S. debt explode. The dollar loses value. The American economy comes under pressure. China has never used this weapon. They have always only held it as insurance, as leverage, as an option. But now, for the first time, they are talking about it publicly. That is the third component of the ultimatum. You have taken $67 billion from us. We can take $770 billion from you. If you are still here, you have understood what this is really about. The question is simple. Do you want all the documentation or just this summary, the complete financial research, China, Venezuela, silver dollar, and everything that's still coming? Link below. Now continue. Let me show you how the USA is responding. Washington is in a difficult position. They have taken Venezuela. That was the easy part. Maduro had no army that could stand up to the USA. He had no allies who would intervene. He only had debts and empty promises. The takeover was a success, but now comes the bill, and the bill is higher than anyone expected. The Pentagon has already responded. Additional troops have been deployed to South America, not to Venezuela itself, to Colombia, to Panama, to Puerto Rico. Strategic positioning in case the situation escalates. The State Department has responded. Diplomatic notes were sent to Beijing. The tone was sharp. The message was clear. Venezuela is an American matter. China has no business here. But China has not listened. China no longer listens. That is what is new about this situation. For decades, China has accepted American actions in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria. They protested, they voted against it, but they did nothing. This time is different. This time China has interests. $67 billion interests, years of investments, strategic partnerships, and they are not willing to simply give that up. The USA has made a mistake. They believe that the rules of 1990 still apply. The rules according to which America can do what it wants. But we no longer live in 1990, we live in 2026. And in 2026, China has the second largest economy in the world, the largest trading nation in the world, the largest foreign exchange reserves in the world, and they are no longer willing to accept American dominance. That is the power struggle. That is the global war. Not with bombs, with economy, with finance, with resources. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what is really happening between the superpowers. Let me show you the fronts. It's not just China versus the USA. It's much bigger. On one side stand the USA and their allies. Europe watching nervously, Japan remaining loyal, South Korea caught in between, Australia following. On the other side stands China, but not alone. Russia has already signaled support, not publicly, but the signs are clear. Russian naval vessels have been sighted in the Caribbean, not far from Venezuela. Officially routine exercises. Unofficially a message. Iran has signaled support. They have experience with American takeovers. They have experience with sanctions. They have experience standing alone against the West, and they are ready to stand at China's side. The BRICS states have convened an emergency meeting. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus the new members, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, over 40% of the world's population, over 35% of global GDP. They are discussing joint measures, joint responses to American actions. This is new, this is dangerous, this is the beginning of a new world order, or the end of the old one. Let me show you what could come next. Scenario 1. Escalation. The USA doubles down. They do not recognize China's demands. They keep control of Venezuela. They ignore the export restrictions. China responds with further measures. The sale of U.S. Treasury bonds begins, not all at once, but enough to shake the markets. Interest rates rise, the dollar falls. The world economy enters a recession. Both sides lose, but neither gives in. That is the most dangerous scenario. Scenario 2. Negotiation. Behind closed doors, a deal is made. China accepts the new government in Venezuela. In return, the debts are partially recognized. Perhaps not 67 billion, but 30 or 40 billion. The export restrictions are relaxed. The rhetoric is dialed down. Both sides claim to have won. That is the most likely scenario. But it solves nothing. It only postpones the conflict. Scenario 3. New reality. Nobody wins, nobody loses. The world divides into an American bloc and a Chinese bloc. Two systems, two currencies, two spheres of influence. Venezuela belongs to the American bloc, but the American bloc loses access to Chinese resources. China loses Venezuela, but China gains influence in other parts of the world. Africa, Central Asia, parts of South America. That is long-term the most likely outcome. A divided world, like during the Cold War, only this time with economic instead of military fronts. Let me tell you what this means for you. You probably live in Europe, and Germany, and Austria, and Switzerland. You might think, this is far away, this doesn't affect me. But you are wrong. Europe stands between the fronts. Europe is economically connected to both sides, with the USA through NATO and trade agreements, with China through supply chains and investments. If this conflict escalates, Europe must choose, and every choice has consequences. If Europe chooses the USA, it loses access to Chinese products. Rare earths become more expensive, electronics become more expensive, industry suffers. If Europe chooses China, it loses American protection. NATO becomes weakened. Security guarantees become questionable. The political order wobbles. Europe cannot remain neutral, not in a conflict of this magnitude. And the choice that Europe makes affects you directly, your jobs, your savings, your future. This is not abstract geopolitics. This is your reality. Let me show you what is happening with the markets. The first effects are already visible. The oil price has risen not because there is less oil, but because uncertainty has increased. Venezuela was an important supplier. Now it is unclear who gets the oil, who sells it, at what price. Uncertainty means higher prices. The gold price has risen. That always happens during geopolitical crises. Gold is the safe haven. When the world becomes uncertain, money flows into gold. That is a pattern that has repeated for millennia. The dollar is under pressure. Not dramatically, not yet. But China's hint about the Treasury bonds has left traces. Investors are nervous. They are asking themselves, what if China is serious? The stock markets are volatile, up and down. No clear direction because nobody knows how the situation will develop. Will there be negotiations? Will there be escalation? Will there be a deal? Nobody knows. And uncertainty is poison for the markets. Let me tell you what the smart investors are doing. They diversify. Don't put everything on one card, not everything on the dollar, not everything on the euro, not everything on stocks, not everything on bonds. They spread their risk. Gold, silver, commodities. Different currencies, different regions. That is not panic, that is caution. That is what reasonable people do when the world becomes uncertain. They prepare for different scenarios. They hope for the best, but they plan for the worst. You should do that too, not tomorrow. Now, because when everyone wants to act at the same time, it is too late. The prices have already risen then. The options are already limited then. The time has already run out then. Let me give you the historical perspective. What we are experiencing is not unprecedented. There have been moments before when superpowers collided. The Suez Crisis, 1956. Great Britain and France tried to control the Suez Canal. The USA and the Soviet Union said no. Great Britain and France had to withdraw. It was the end of the British Empire as a global power. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. The Soviet Union tried to station missiles in Cuba. The USA said no. The world stood on the brink of nuclear war. In the end, there was a compromise. The Soviet Union withdrew the missiles. The USA promised not to invade Cuba. Both sides claimed to have won. The oil crisis, 1973. The Arab states imposed an oil embargo. Western economies fell into a severe recession. The world order changed. What we are experiencing now could be similarly significant. Venezuela could be the trigger. For a reordering of the world, for the end of American dominance, for the rise of a multipolar order. We don't know yet. We are in the middle of it. History will only be written later, but you can be sure this is a historic moment. A moment that will be remembered. A moment that changes everything. Let me tell you what you should observe. In the coming days and weeks, certain events will be important. Observe the rhetoric. Is it getting sharper or milder? Sharper rhetoric means escalation. Milder rhetoric means negotiation. Observe the markets. Does the gold price continue to rise? Does the dollar continue to fall? Does volatility continue to rise? These are indicators of sentiment. Observe the troop movements. Are more American soldiers being deployed to South America? Are more Chinese ships being sent to the Caribbean? These are indicators of readiness for escalation. Observe the BRICS. What do they decide at their emergency meeting? Joint sanctions against the USA? Joint support for China? Or just empty words? Observe Europe. How does the EU position itself? Solidarity with the USA, or neutrality, or even its own position? These events will tell you where the journey is going, whether towards escalation, towards negotiation, or towards a new world order. Stay informed. Stay attentive. Stay prepared. Let me tell you something personal. I don't make these videos to scare you. I make them to inform you because I believe that informed people make better decisions. The mainstream media doesn't tell you the whole story. They tell you the simple version, the version that raises no questions, the version that triggers no panic. But the world is not simple. The world is complex, and you deserve to understand the complexity so that you can make the right decisions for yourself and your family. That is my goal. Not panic, not fear, information, context, perspective, so that you are prepared no matter what comes. China has issued an ultimatum. The USA has crossed a boundary. The power struggle has begun. What happens next? Nobody knows. But one thing is certain. The world of yesterday no longer exists. The rules have changed, the fronts have shifted, and we all must adapt to a new reality, to new risks, to new opportunities. Venezuela was the trigger, but the conflict has been simmering for a long time. The debts, the trade wars, the technological rivalry, the different visions for the world order, all pent up, and now it breaks open. In Venezuela, but also elsewhere. Taiwan could be the next flashpoint. The South China Sea, the Middle East, Africa, everywhere where American and Chinese interests collide. We live in a time of upheaval, a time of uncertainty, but also a time of possibilities. For those who understand what is happening. For those who prepare, for those who act, while others are still watching. Be one of them. Not one of those who later say, I should have known, but one of those who say, I was prepared. Subscribe to this channel for daily updates. The next weeks will be decisive. We'll see each other tomorrow with the latest developments from a world that is changing before our eyes. Stay informed, stay prepared, and never forget. In times of upheaval, fortunes are made and lost. The question is only on which side you stand. The decision is yours, but make it consciously and make it now, because time does not wait, history does not wait, and the power struggle does not wait. It has already begun.